When I started writing my PhD thesis, one of the things that I frequently did was that I would often write long, windy, convoluted, and complex sentences. Those sentences would often be something like a paragraph consisting of several sentences that were tied together using conjunctions and prepositions and the frequent use of punctuation marks. Under one such sentence, my supervisor wrote a comment, "One hell of a sentence. Can you break this sentence into several simpler sentences?" Because the sentence actually consists of several thoughts that are combined together, and it will be difficult for the reader to make sense of the whole thing. That was like a paradigm shift for me. So I started thinking on the possibility of converting my style to simple sentences, and overall this idea that I need to bring in simplicity into my writing style, especially in my academic writing style. So this is the idea that I would now like to share with you. So what is simplicity in academic writing? Why do we need to simplify our academic writing, our sentences, our paragraphs, so that the meaning that we want to convey to the reader is clearly conveyed? So let us begin first. Academic writing, basically simplicity. Let us begin with a quote from Leonardo da Vinci, an Italian polymath, who says that simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. Similarly, Walt Whitman, another writer, says the art of art, the glory of expression, and the sunshine of the light of letters is simplicity. Similarly, philosopher Henry David Thoreau says, our life is frittered away by detail. Simplify, simplify. So a bit of the philosophical side of simplicity, the importance and beauty of simplicity that these writers, these authors, these philosophers have highlighted. Simplicity in academic writing actually means expression, the expression of complex ideas clearly and elegantly, without unnecessary complexity or the use of jargon or the use of complex vocabulary, or you can say verbosity. Simplicity, but you should keep in mind that simplicity does not mean simplification, or you can say a completely non-academic type of writing in academic context. But it actually means precision, clarity, and depth. And so these are the things that we need to make use of in order to communicate in a refined and scientific manner. Now, why is it that we need to have simplicity in academic writing? So there are several reasons. First of all, simplicity of our style, our language, increases the clarity of what we write. So readers generally can easily grasp the core of the ideas that we want to communicate. So whatever writing it is, especially academic writing, the focus is not on, you can say, the show off of your vocabulary or the complexity of your thoughts or language, but actually the communication of ideas in a way that the reader understands. So if your writing is clear, that is something that will be appreciated. Secondly, simplicity is important because it improves, it gives clear message, and the reader stays with the writer because the reader understands what the writer is saying or communicating. Thirdly, it reduces misinterpretation. Complexity or complex form of writing often leads to misinterpretation on the part of the reader, while simple styles of reading, accessible vocabulary and structure helps in presenting complex structures and complex ideas in simpler forms and in simpler ways. So this is something that happens when we make use of simplicity in academic writing. Here are some examples. So I have two types of examples of simple sentences and then complex sentences. So first cluttered or complex or dense sentences, and then simpler sentences, both in academic writing. So look at the first sentence, the cluttered or dense category. The present investigation endeavors to examine the multifaceted interrelationship between instructional staff's intrinsic and extrinsic motivational dimensions and the multidimensional constructs of pupils' participatory behavior in geographically isolated learning contexts. You can clearly see that the idea here is difficult to grasp, mainly because of the complexity and the density, the cluttered nature of this sentence. So what happens is here is we have too many abstract nouns and modifiers. We have the main idea that is not clear, and it is difficult or hard to follow. Lastly, it is a complex sentence structure, and so it will be difficult for readers, especially readers who are reading this text for the first time, to grasp the essence of what the writer wants to convey. The same thought can be presented in a more simpler and clearer way. So, for example, look at the same thought in this simple but sophisticated academic sentence. This study explores the impact of teacher motivation on student engagement in the rural school. Now, it's the same thing presented in a more simpler form, clear form. Here, there is a clear subject in action. There is no unnecessary jargon, and it is easy to understand. But at the same time, it is formal and academic in its tone. Here is another example of a paragraph of dense writing, or you can say cluttered and dense writing. The functionality of institutional leadership within the framework of educational organizations has increasingly become the focal point of scholarly discourse, primarily due to its perceived potential in effectuating enhanced pedagogical outcomes when administrative figures, particularly those occupying principal level designations, engage in multidimensional goal setting and holistic stakeholder engagement practices. The resultant institutional productivity is, according to an increasing body of empirical inquiry, elevated. Consequently, it is posited that the allocation of financial and intellectual capital towards leadership development initiative may be instrumental in fostering systematic educational advancement. You might be scratching your head, and so might be others who are reading such text, such cluttered, dense text for the first time, especially those who are actually not experts in the field, who are not specialists in the field. And the general reader will find this something as something that just goes out of their mind. So here what happens is that we have long overstuffed sentences. We have excessive use of abstract nouns, which is called nominalization, and we have the obscurity. Resultantly, the meaning is obscure. And lastly, what happens is, this is just one paragraph, but if you read more than one such paragraphs in, for example, one setting, what will happen is that the reader, the reader will have fatigue set in quickly, and boredom, and so lack of comprehension. Now, the same thought can be expressed in a simpler but elegant and sophisticated academic language. So, for example, look at this one. Effective school leadership plays a central role in improving educational outcomes. Principals who set clear goals, support teachers, and involve communities often lead more successful schools. Research shows that when leadership is focused and collaborative, student performance improves. Therefore, investing in leadership training can be a key step towards school improvement. Now, again, the same thought expressed in simpler sentences, simpler language. These are not completely, you can say, non-academic. This is completely academic language, but in a more simpler, accessible language. What happens is there is more logical flow here. You see each sentence builds on the previous one, so each sentence is connected to the previous one. There is clear use of clear language, and academic tone and style are still intact. So this is again an example of simplicity in a paragraph form, and you can see that it's more accessible as well. Now, here are some examples of sentences in academic writing that are complex, you can say very long sentences, and that are inaccessible. For example, the sentence on the left side, the original complex sentence, and then on the right side, you can say the blue box in the white text, you can see that the same original complex sentence has been, you can say, has been presented or has been broken down into simpler sentences. And so that has made that text more accessible to the general reader particularly, but also to the more sophisticated readers as well. So first, let us read the sentence, the original complex sentence. The implementation of student-centered pedagogical strategies, which are increasingly advocated in policy documents and educational reform agendas, particularly in developing countries, often encounters significant resistance due to entrenched teacher beliefs, lack of professional development opportunities, and systematic constraints within under-resourced school environments. So you see this sentence, which is like a combination of several thoughts, has been striven together using a lot of punctuation and you can say conjunctions, and so the overall impact is that it is a very complex sentence. It is difficult for the reader to keep a track of what the writer actually wants to convey. On the other hand, look at the right side. In the blue box, you see that this sentence has been broken down into simpler sentences, and that is more accessible. Student-centered teaching strategies are widely promoted in education policy and reform efforts, especially in developing countries. Sentence 1, and a clear idea presented. Sentence 2, however, these strategies often face resistance in practice. Clear idea. Third, common barriers include entrenched teacher beliefs, limited access to professional development, and systematic challenges in under-resourced schools. So you can see breaking this main thought into 3 sub-thoughts and presenting them in simple and accessible sentences leads to what each sentence presents one idea clearly, and then it's easier to understand and to digest without getting stuck in the complexity of the thought. Now, here is another example of a complex sentence from the field of psychology, and then the same sentence broken down into simpler sentences. So on the left side, although the prefrontal cortex has long been implicated in executive functioning, recent neuroimaging research suggests a more nuanced distributed neural network model in which various regions interact dynamically during complex cognitive tasks, thereby challenging traditional localizationist assumptions and demanding a reconsideration of how cognitive processes are mapped in the brain. I'm finding it difficult to even read such sentences. And so on the right side, the prefrontal cortex has traditionally been associated with executive functioning. However, recent neuroimaging studies suggest a more distributed model of brain function. Multiple regions appear to interact dynamically during complex cognitive tasks. This challenges older theories that linked specific functions to isolated brain areas. Now see the difference. The difference is that on the right side, what we see in the shorter sentences, that more complex ideas are made accessible. This side also retains scientific accuracy, and at the same time, each sentence builds upon the previous one, and a more complex thought has been presented in a more logical and accessible way. So, to summarize, there are certain features that distinguish between the simple but sophisticated form of academic writing and the cluttered and dense type of academic writing. So the first one is that sentence length. Generally, in the simple but sophisticated form of academic writing, the sentence length is moderate generally. On the other hand, in the cluttered one, it is often too long. The vocabulary is precise and clear in the simple but sophisticated writing, while it is overly technical and jargon heavy in the other one. The grammar is generally active voice is preferred in the simple and sophisticated writing, although many could argue that this might not always be the case. But on the other hand, in the more cluttered one, we generally see heavy use of passive voices, and you can say a very informal type, formal type of an impersonal type of writing style. The structure of the simple but sophisticated writing is logical and progressive, while on the other hand, the cluttered one is generally rambling and digressive, and so there are quite the readers can get a lot of digressions there. And the tone is in the simple and sophisticated one generally is formal, but it is readable. On the other hand, in the cluttered one, it is over academic and generally inflated and full of jargon.